I'm Birgit O'Connor, and welcome to my studio. Today I'd like to show you how I approach painting a white flower. First of all, I'll decide on my composition, and then I'll break it up into simple forms. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using Arches 140-pound cold pressed paper. Now, after I have my composition down, I'm going to work with the largest shapes first. And each one is I'm going to work on each individual shape. I'm not going to do a wash on the entire paper. So I'm breaking these shapes up, and I'm going to create a clean water wash over each large shape. I'm going to start with one at a time. Fill it in with clean water. This is working with the foundation here. I'm going to start with my largest shape. Clean water. I'm going to be using a Hake brush. This is an inexpensive bamboo brush. You have to make sure that you don't start losing these little hairs. They like to come out. You can always lift them out with a dry brush. When you're doing a watercolor, white is going to be the paper underneath. Now you want to have some water on that. Otherwise, if you just have white paper and no water on top, it's going to be too stark. It's going to look dead. It's not going to have any kind of texture to it. So if you go ahead and create your clean water wash over it, and if you think about what white is, white really is all the colors of the rainbow combined into a bright white. Okay, so on your palette, you can actually mix your colors, but using a lot of water. I have clean water on my petal area, on my flower area here. Then I'm going to take a little bit of green and a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to mix that in. Also, sometimes I like to use just French ultramarine blue and a little yellow ochre or a little burnt umber, and it's just touches of color. Okay, now wherever the fold is, I'm just going to go ahead and add some suggestions. Make it a little interesting, so not only two colors, but just like I said, hints of color. Lots of water. Okay, now I'm going to have to lift my paper up so it can start to blend. I'm rotating my paper. Now I didn't paint all the way up to the edges, so I'm going to take clean water again and just go to the edges. This is my first wash. Okay, and then let this dry. As you can see, as it dries lighter than when we're putting the paint down. Okay, make sure it's dry to the touch. Okay, now once this is dry, you can go ahead and work on your next petal. This way they won't bleed into each other. Again, I'm going to use clean water. Go over the entire area. As you can see, I'm not working on anything else but what is going to be the intended white flower. And then repeat the process, adding a little bit of pigment here and there just to create some form. A little variety is good. interest of a little green maybe in here. Okay, I'm getting ready to lift my paper up so it can blend. Let's bring the clear water all the way out to the edges. Let it roll. Now if this is, if the color is going anywhere I don't really want it to go, I could take a clean brush, clean water, rinse it out, dry it off, and then start to lift out some of the pigment. So you're not really going to think that it looks white because it has a little bit of pigment, and it's going to look darker because you have the white of your background. Let this dry. As it's drying, I find that I have a few hairs from my hake brush that are left on the painting. So I'm going to clean my brush, make sure all the excess water or color is out of it, and just start lifting that hair up just like that. Really did a lot of them here. Just like that. Now working with shadows is going to help to bring out the depth and pop those flowers out. So here we go. Let's add a little bit of French ultramarine blue, a little burnt umber. Just like that. I'm going to take a big clean brush, turn my paper, I'll take the hard edges and just wipe them out. Just pull it out. And then repeat the process as I go around my flower. This is going to help bring that contrast out. What I also like to do is, since I want to show the center of the flower, I'm going to take a little bit of green, a little bit of green gold mixed in with a little burnt umber, and I'm going to add the suggestion in here with a dry brush. A dry brush means that the paper is not wet first. So a dry brush, and then I'm going to take a clean brush. This is a number 30 Cosmos, and then I'm going to pull out an edge that I want to blend into the rest of the flower, because I want one side to have a hard edge and the other side to have that softer edge. Okay, now I'm going to let this dry again. Now in this demonstration you can practice this at home. All you have to do is do 2 large circles and try it with different values and a lot of water and a little bit of pigment and experiment. Now we are going to go in and define more of the shadows. work on it, I'm going to put it aside, I'm going to take a look at it and try to get some value concept here. I don't want it all to be on the same plane. I want to pop this first flower out. That's my main interest. Once these flowers are dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the background to show you how that, having a darker background, is again going to help pop this white out. Now you can use variegated washes for the background. You can make landscapes, you can add clean water and mists, you can do all sorts of things. But what I want to show you is the contrast. Okay, now as you can see, this is really starting to show some depth. Once I've created that darker background, it's going to help me see what do I need to improve on my main flower to help create more depth. This is going to show us the simplest way of how we're going to pop this flower out. Okay, now I can go ahead and start working on these other buds. Again, I'm going to use clean water. Clean water and just a little bit of pigment. Okay, as you can see, we're starting to create more and more depth. Now I always wait with my backgrounds until I have my foundation down. I'm not waiting for this bud, but I want you to take a look and see what I've got. I don't really plan it out first. I have my basic composition down and I work with that, but I allow the flower to take me where it wants to go. Yes, the background of my table is a little sloppy. I just go ahead and paint to the edge and over the edge. So there you have it. This is how you create a basic white flower. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, it's pretty much only using clear water with just a little bit of pigment, and by having a contrasting background that helps to create the depth. Now I suggest you experiment and just create different shapes. Don't even worry about trying to create a particular flower or anything like that. Work with circles, work with squares. Just experiment first. And I know that you will have a good time with this. I do. So enjoy yourself, and thanks for joining me. Bye. Hi, I'm Birgit O'Connor, and welcome to my studio. Today I'd like to show you how to do a water drop in watercolor, which is a lot of fun and really exciting once you get to know how to do it, and it also amazes the people that view it, and it's very simple to do. Now the materials that we're going to be using are a pencil, a brush, paint, and liquid frisket here. And the paper that I like to use is Arches 140-pound or 300-pound cold or rough press paper. For this demonstration, I'm using 140-pound cold press paper. So how I like to begin is For this demonstration, what I'm going to do is show you a perimeter and just do the demonstration, and you'll be able to see on some of my paintings how I've applied them. So I'm starting with a perimeter approximately 4 inches by 6 inches. Now this is going to help me to stay within a certain area and I don't just start wandering all over the paper. Then I'm going to take my liquid frisket here, masking material, and I'm going to use this incredible nib. Now this nib has 2 felt edges on it, really hard felt, one wide and one narrow tip. The other alternatives that you can use is a calligraphy pen or an old brush, but you have to be very careful when you're using brushes because it will ruin them. You can also take your old brushes and dip them into liquid soap, liquid detergent, and then use it on the frisket. That's supposed to be fine, and you can peel it off of your brush, but I wouldn't recommend that. I don't want to risk that with my brushes if I'm planning to use them for further paintings. So with this particular nib, you dip it in here, and once it dries, when you're done, you can easily just peel it off. So it's a wonderful tool to have. It's called the Incredible Nib. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and dip it into my frisket here. Let's see, before I do that, I'm going to make an oblong circle. Okay, I've created my drop by creating this circle. Okay, let's see, make sure I have enough on here, dip it back in here. And then I'm going to just add a little tiny drop on the upper left-hand semi-corner. And I'm going to let that dry before I go back in and add some color. Otherwise, what can happen is that little frisket might end up on my brush, which I don't want, and it's going to ruin those hairs. Make sure your masking fluid is dry just by lightly touching it and seeing if it sticks to your finger or not. Okay, once this dries, I'm going to go in and take my number 12 brush and I'm going to start laying some color down. I'm going to go over the total inside of the perimeter. So this is what's nice about using that masking material, because I don't have to try to go around this little tiny white area. Laying the color down, this is the first wash. I'm also using a dry brush. By using a dry brush means that I'm not wetting the entire area first. The paper's dry, the brush was dry until I added the pigment on it. Okay, now I'm going to let this dry. As you can see, the paint is rolling off the dried masking fluid, allowing the paper underneath to remain white. Okay, once this is dry, I can go back in and I can see my pencil drawing, which is underneath this wash of color, and take a clean brush and fill up the entire inside of my circle. And by doing that and softening that paint up, it's going to allow me to lift up the pigment underneath. Now you have to make sure that that first wash that you created is dry before you do this. Otherwise, what's going to happen is it's going to start to bleed into the fibers around it and you're not going to have a nice sharp edge. Plan your water drops, then apply the masking fluid, and after that dries, start to work on your washes of color. Then after that dries, go in and start working on your drops. So go ahead and lift some paint up. And if you need to, add more water to the inside of your drop. Also, now when you're doing a water drop, if you look at the shadow will be on one side, and then you have your bubble, your little drop, and then there's going to be a darker edge of your bubble. So we're going to try to keep that balanced, and the lightest area is going to be next to your shadow. So I want to add a little bit more of a darker pigment, and that's going to be up on the top. Color in there. So we can actually really define our drop. And let that dry. Okay, once this is dry, we can start to work with our shadow. Now again, you have to make sure that your water drop, your potential water drop, is completely dry. Otherwise, your shadow is going to start to blend into your drop because of the little fibers of the paper. So I'm going to take a little ultramarine blue and a little burnt umber. Okay, and be a little bit random when you're adding your shadow, so it isn't like perfectly down below it. Maybe a little off to the side, a little off to the center. Just play around with it. Okay, so create your shadow. It's a solid color that you're going to add here. Then go up along the side a little bit, kind of blend it out. Okay, and while this is still wet, you can take clean water or your brush, which you've just dried off, and start to lift out some of that color, because that's going to be a little bit of the reflection in the shadow. Once this is dry, you can go in and take your little bit of frisket off. Just rub it off with your finger. And there you have it. You have your shine and your shadow and your drop. Also, if you decide that your shine is just a little bit too white, what I like to do is just take my brush, dip it into my water, because in the water it's already going to have a little bit of pigment, so it's not going to be the whitest white. And I might just like to dab it on there just to kind of reduce that white. So here we have a water drop. Okay, now what would happen if you decided you wanted to do a water drop, but you want to do it with a light wash? Maybe you want to do it on a rose, a light peach rose, or a light yellow, or a white flower, or anything very light. So I'm going to use the white of my paper. And for this demonstration, I'm going to make a horizontal drop. So it's not a perfect circle, because now if you visualize a drop, it's going to be a little heavy on the ends and a little flatter on the bottom. So I have my pencil drawing. I'm going to create my perimeter. Actually, I don't really need to have a perimeter on here because it's white, but I'm just going to do that. Okay, I'm going to use my masking material, dip it in there. And wherever you want your light source to come from, your shine, just go ahead and place that dot on there. and then let that dot dry of masking material. Okay, once that's dry, I can go in with clean water and do the entire inside of that drop, that potential drop, with clean water. Then I'm going to take, let's say, a number 6 brush, and I'm going to add a little bit of blue because I want this to reflect the sky. And I'm going to add it to the back end. I'm not going to go all the way around my drop here because otherwise it's going to look a little too odd. So just a little bit. I'm going to bring around a very light wash of this pigment and blend it in. Now I'm going to help bring out that shine by adding a little bit of a darker pigment here. Okay, now if it's starting to look like it's not blending good enough for you, go ahead and take a brush with clean water and start to blend it. I'll let that dry. Okay, now once this is dry, you can go ahead and work with your shadow. Now since this is a horizontal drop, my shadow is going to lay to the side. So about halfway down the side of my drop, I'm going to pull it out, I'm going to go way out, and then start to go underneath my drop. A little narrow area right underneath my drop. Okay, and then what I'm going to do, since it's a solid color that I have here, is I'm going to take clean water which I put on the brush and then again dried off, and lift out some of that color. And there I have my drop. Now let's review. Begin with your pencil drawing and a light dot of masking fluid, clean water on the inside of the drop, and then start to add your pigment and let it flow into the clean water. Let it dry. Then you can go in and start to add your shadow, which is going to help to add that dimensional quality to your drop.
Now for the vertical drop, my approach is the same. Pencil drawing, masking fluid, then I'm going to go in with a colored wash over the entire area, and you can still see the pencil drawing. Let it dry. Then start to saturate the area that I have designated for my drop. Then I can go in and start to add my shadow, which is going to help add that dimension. By scrubbing out some of the area, that's going to help show the reflection through the drop into the shadow. Now I'd like to show you how I would go about approaching a water drop on a petal. I begin with my pencil drawing, a highlight of masking fluid, and then a clean water wash over the entire petal. While my petal's wet, I can go ahead and start to add the pigment and let it flow into the clean water. If I need to, I can tip my paper up and roll it around, and this will help the pigment blend. To add more interest, I'll go ahead and mix my paint on my paper. Now before I can work on my drops, I have to make sure that my petal's dry. After my petal's completely dry, I can start to add clean water into my designated drop areas. I'll saturate the drop, and then I can go ahead and start to lift out some of the pigment underneath. I like to add a darker color to help bring out the highlights. I can do this by putting it into the clean water wash that I created inside my drop, or I can wait till after it's dry. Then I'll have to use a clean brush with clean water to help soften up any hard edges that I might not want to have. Now I'll let it dry. I can still go in and scrub out with clean water any additional highlights I might want to add. Now before I can work on my shadow, I have to make sure that my water drop is completely dry. Otherwise the shadow is going to bleed into my drop and I won't have a nice sharp edge. As you can see, by adding the shadow, I'm starting to create depth. Next time when you're looking at a water drop, take a look and see how the shadow is cast. Now after I laid down my solid color in the shadow here, I can go ahead and start to lift out some of the pigment. This is going to help create the illusion of a water drop. After I'm completely done working on my drop, I can go ahead and lift off the dried masking fluid. Now here I have my petal.
So here you have your water drop. Now I suggest that you practice and have a good time.